So, Olive, you made a point, which was we go into wilderness far more than we think. So, in regards to this valley, what's the difference with our approach to medicine in the wilderness compared to maybe some other areas in the country?
Is that just for me?
I am posing that to you. I'm gonna yes. So in this valley, we have a unique approach to medicine in the wilderness. What is it that we do differently here? What are like some of the observations that you made? Maybe you haven't made them, I don't know. So I'm kind of driving down the road. If I'm putting you into a corner, just...
The thing that made me think of that is being, you mentioned and when I travel, I don't travel like I'm going into the backcountry, but when you travel into places like smaller cities, you put yourself at risk of not being able to get to a hospital or not being able to get to care that is similar to being in the backcountry, but it's still in an urban environment.
Okay. Do you mind if the only reason why I'm gonna interrupt you because I want to drive the conversation because you're making some great points here. So you say smaller cities. What areas, so if we go, what changes with medicine as we travel around this country? Where do you have perceived better access to medicine?
Maybe in a place expecting there to be exposure or like a need for it.
Okay, so for instance, where have we identified excellence in medical training in this country? Universities. Okay, and interestingly enough, where are they? Okay, they're in cities. They're in major cities. And what I find even more fascinating is that they're somewhat polarized in regards to the coasts. There is some things going on, like UMPC, which is Pitt. We have an amazing medical center in Pittsburgh. We're not a coast, but again, we have these major cities. Now, where do we see a deficit?
I see. In this valley, what I see is a culture that's bred an awareness of medicine at a lower level. In other words, so you have the Aggie courses, which address the wintertime, and then there's an awareness about the risk that you're going to take before you. We build an awareness, but we also have an infrastructure, like they recently have their own helicopter now.
Okay.
So you can extend the medical care quickly from this valley.
So where do we focus our medical care in this valley? Do we focus it on trauma or medical? Trauma. Why?
Because we're a high-risk environment.
Oh, that's what happens. Okay, so we're in a high-risk environment. Okay. We're not in a high-risk environment. We are in a risk-tolerant culture. Okay, we're in a risk-tolerant culture. Why? Does anybody know why? 100%. What drives the acceptance? What drives the acceptance of risk in this valley? No, not the industry. On the contrary. The individuals that engage with what? Our environment, our specific terrain, okay, is the driving factor. And then culturally, what shifted? Does anybody know the history? Okay, so we've always been risk tolerant. Even, Paul Petzl would say we were risk tolerant. And a gentleman by the name of Owen, who preceded Petzel, drove that risk tolerance. Does anybody even understand where I'm going here when I say Owen? Yeah, Owen Spalding, exactly. So we have a peak named after this guy, right? Mount Owen. And so at the end of the day, what we have going on is that we have individuals that engage with in an environment, and because of their particular perspective, they then drive culture that then follows. So people like Jack Durrance came after in the 20s, and Paul Petzel was one as well, who then continued this whole idea of keeping it Western, right? And accepting the risk and engaging in an environment because of what they found from it. And so now today, it's interesting because if you recognize, I always laugh, I always like to bring in this thing called Jackson Hole Air Force. I don't know if you guys have heard of them. Yeah. So they drove our culture for a number of years. They're the reason why we have an open gate policy at the village. And that led into a thing called TGR, because those folks were TGR, just they were Air Force before it was TGR, and they decided to make a career out of it. And then we then foster more individuals that are attracted to this persona, okay? And then today, we change our access in regards to rescuing simply because of what? Now this is an interesting piece, because I got news for you. Nobody gave a shit about Air Force getting caught in an avalanche other than to give them shit. And funny, they didn't. And if they did, it was rare, right? But we have more accidents today than ever. Why? There is a numbers thing, but for instance, when I came into the when I came into the valley, there were less than, and that was when I came into the valley 25 years ago, but when I moved here 17 years ago, going on 18 years, less than 100 people had skied the Grand. Less than 100 people had skied the Grand 18 years ago. Yeah. Today, arguably 100 people skied it this season, if not more. Why? Okay, access to equipment, but what's even more important, access to what?
Here is
Perceived safety through what? Bingo, search and rescue. Because when I came in as deputy director, we were doing roughly 90 rescues a year. The overwhelming majority were on the ground. Okay, we had a helicopter, but we flew infrequently. Okay, and part of that was money. Okay, now who drives the culture today around safety? Who drives it?
Well, I have a question. So, I mean, you've been associated with CSAR. I understand that nobody has to pay for an extraction by helicopter.
They never did. They never did.
Doesn't that push the boundaries of people assuming risk farther and farther?
On the contrary, it doesn't. Okay. The fact that it's free doesn't. The fact that it's interesting, the fact that it costs reduces individuals from calling, okay? But that never changed the rescue profile. But for instance, does anybody know? So we flew rarely today. Do you know how often we fly? Every day. Every day. Why?
People are out there doing it.
No. Resources are abundant. And so when I came into this whole scene, it was like, well, we have a helicopter, we'll use it infrequently. And now we use it very frequently because of resources. And now because of those resources, what is the expectation now? Bingo, faster rescue. And it's generally going to be via what? Helicopter. I got news for you. So we do roughly 115 rescues a year. So that's a little more than a 20% increase from when I retired just 7 years ago. They've never gone down. It's going to keep going up. Okay? And the reason is why? No. It is more efficient and it does perceptibly reduce risk. The problem is that when that helicopter goes down, the risk is unmanageable. And I actually got to witness that during my tenure. That's actually why I came into leadership, was because our helicopter went down. We killed one of our team members in that process. Okay? And then I was told, you're in leadership now, make sure this never happens again. And then when I retired, I said, it's gonna happen again. It's just a matter of time. Okay, so I'm gonna stop there for a second. So now, who enacts wilderness? Who enacted it? So, do we have a pardon? Yes, it did. It did. In terms of our social climate today, what system or structure enacted wilderness? Federal government did. Does anybody know what year that was enacted? I wish. 1964, it's the Wilderness Act from 1964, and basically, to keep it very simple, it's no motors, no man-made structures. There's not supposed to even be signs in designated wilderness, okay? There's not even supposed to be signs, nothing man-made, okay? Now today, when I came onto the team, we rarely flew into wilderness. We needed a life threat in order to be able to get an authorization from the Forest Service to be allowed to do it. Today we fly into wilderness daily. So what does this do to the construct of our, so what is it that we go to wilderness for? I heard somebody say, oh, no cell service, dependence on the self, introspection. I love it. And then what's happening? No. What are we doing to wilderness? The lines are getting blurred. Why? Okay. Now, this is also a historical concept that I like to bring into perspective here, which is that, so all of you today, whether you know it or not, you should be stewards of wilderness, okay? Why? Because it's the only thing we have that is supposed to not get developed. Why is it getting developed? I'm gonna short circuit the conversation. Because we have more users today that are coming from urban environments that expect what? Urban services in the wilderness environment. And so as I like to remind folks, especially those of you that are guides, we do not guide experience. I should say, let me back that up. We do guide experience, but we do not guide outcome. And so for instance, my clients today, they know that a summit or a particular ski line is a byproduct of the experience. Just happens to be this thing we might get. But ultimately, what I try to teach the individuals that I go into the wilderness with, or into the backcountry in general, is how we live. If you go to Europe, they teach you how to eat, they teach you how to act, and then they teach you how to ski properly. Why? Because it's a fucking disgrace to ski like an American in Europe. Okay? It's a disgrace to eat like an American in Europe. Okay? And it's a disgrace to speak English in Europe, because culture matters. So recognize this. In the United States, we're losing culture to technology. Technology is interrupting our culture. I don't know what our culture ever was in this country. It was family values at one point. But that's even getting disrupted because it's like, I should have less kids. You shouldn't, we're going to destroy the environment. I think the environment made us for a reason. And the reason is for us to recognize what it is that's most valuable to us. So when you think about wilderness, I'm going to give you this concept to think about. It's comfort versus convenience. And you can be comfortable, but as you bring more convenience into the outdoors, you reduce the experience, okay? The problem is that it's forever lost. You never go back. You never go back. Why? Because once you land a helicopter in wilderness, the expectation is there. It's been done before. It's going to happen again. It's going to happen more frequently. And then we need a bigger team. We need more people. And so, for instance, the first time I went into South America, I remember going to Patagonia 30 years ago. We walked in, and I'll never forget it. A buddy of mine broke his leg when we got to camp. Took us 3 days to get to camp. He had a 70-plus pound pack on, broke his leg as we got to camp. And I remember saying to him, I was like, dude, I don't know how we're going to get you out of here. And he looked at me and he said, I'm going to get myself out of here. He goes, because by the time you get out of here and go find somebody that would be willing to come in here to get us, he goes, I could have gotten myself out. So how about we just figure out how to get me out of here and we just call it good like that. And it's interesting because now I can go to those exact same places in South America and it's all helicopter access today and you have rescues same day. So just think about that as we develop and as we create convenience that we disrupt the process. Okay, because process is where we learn, and if we don't know where we've come, we have no idea where we are today. And that is arguably what I feel like my role, and a lot of us in this industry, what our role is to remind everybody where we were and how we got to here. Because we can't go back, but we could slow the process a little bit and still continue to enjoy what it is that we have. Okay? So, Haley. Mm-hmm. Right. It happens over and over and over. That's what development is. Development is the sellout to the highest bidder with an opportunity for more convenience at the expense of culture. Individual choice. Your particular approach about how you engage. You cannot change how anybody else engages. You can't stop helicopters, they're going to keep going. But what you can do is you can be that shining bright beacon, right, of excellence in anything that you do and have moral integrity in regards to what's important to you. So for instance, if you come to my house and have dinner and you bring your damn phone into my house, I'm going to ask you to leave it back out in the car. Because there is no reason for any of us to check our phones while we're at dinner together. That's just a piece of culture. Okay? So what's important to you? And that's the question you have to keep asking yourself every day of your existence. Because it's going to change. The questions are always the same, always the same. There's an amazing story about Einstein, and his colleagues were giving him shit. And he was 3 years into teaching at a university here in the States, and his colleague said, Albert, you need to change the test. And he goes, what do you mean, change the test? And he said, all of the students are passing your test around. They all know the questions. He goes, I'm not changing the test. And they said, but you're giving away knowledge. He said, no, I'm not. He goes, the answer is change. And he even knew that in his own science, which is what he taught 70, 80 years ago? Well, it's a basis, it's fundamental, but it's still not, it's changed. That truth has changed. So just keep recognizing that. The truth changes, and it'll change for you as it will for everybody in this room. The question always stays the same. If you're not asking me the question, that's the problem. And that's what I argue with the greater community is that we don't ask these questions of ourselves as to why. Instead, we engage unconsciously and then we destroy the environment that we're supposedly protecting. But you can't do that unless you keep asking the question. Okay? Because I got news for you, there's no such thing as leave no trace. So once you own that and realize that that's a fallacy, then you start to recognize that you impact things and then you become responsible for your actions. Because I know this, I've been impacting the outdoors since the day I got there. Although my impact is lessened as I've spent more time with it. Because I understand the medium that I'm working with better. That's the relationship. Does that answer your question? Okay. So make no mistake, there is conceptual and philosophical ideas that are associated with all of this, and if you're not asking these questions, you're probably in the wrong room. We'll start leading you into these questions, okay? And if you don't think they're related, hang on, you'll see. It'll all come because it's all related. It's all related, okay? I have to recognize that my leadership in SAR is partially responsible for the fact that we're getting a helicopter that I hate today. With that being said, I have to understand what I'm part of and I have to realize that I was part of that system. I can't change it, although I can affect the questions that you ask yourself, hopefully. I can't affect your answers because those are yours.